All right, guys, we are back from break. Now we're going to start into chapter 2. So, understanding the micro world. So, this is a lot in this chapter. It's a big chapter, and it's going to cover all of your bacteria, your viruses, your fungi, your parasites, all of that. So, it's going to So it's going to hit your objectives. All right, so read over your objectives. So what's a pathogen? So pathogens are microorganisms. So small living organisms that can be seen only in a microscope. So here's the thing, I can't see these. I can't see if it's on the food or not. It's not like a cockroach or a spider or a fly. You can't see these things. Pathogens are harmful microorganisms. They make people sick when eaten or produces toxins that cause illness. Toxin is a poison, injected with a poison. So you're going to see that. So your big pathogens are 4. You got 4 of them, and you have bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi. Who's your fungi? All right, you'll see I'll crack jokes as we go. All right, so how contamination happens. Food handlers can contaminate food when they don't wash their hands when using the restroom. So I cannot tell you how many people, they have a bowel movement, they don't wash their hands, and then they have feces all over their hands, and then they come and they make salad, and now it's a fecal oral where now people get sick. The fecal is the poop goes into your mouth and you get sick. That's fecal oral. They are you're in contact with somebody who's sick. So let's say somebody's sick, they have a fever, they're jaundiced. If you see somebody jaundiced where they're yellow, they can't be in the kitchen. If you see somebody who is vomiting, sneezing, all of that, and they come in contact with food surfaces, guess what? People get sick. And then touching dirty, contaminated equipment that hasn't been cleaned, and then touching the food. Simple mistakes can cause contamination, and that's usually what it is. It's usually 90% of the time it's a human error. You didn't do something. You didn't cook it long enough. You didn't check the temperature. You didn't wash your hands. You touched it with your hands. I know on TV it drives me nuts because all I see is, these big chefs, and they are always cooking and never putting gloves on, and it drives me nuts because you got to. I don't want to eat your food if you're not. So allowing ready-to-eat food to touch a surface that contacted raw meat, seafood, or poultry. Guess what? Again, let's say I'm cutting up some shrimp. I'm peeling deveined shrimp in a sink, and I throw my lettuce in there to wash it, and boom, I just cross-contaminated. People get sick from it. Storing food or cleaning supplies incorrectly. You don't put cleaning supplies next to the food, and failing to spot signs of pests. So you'll see there's little pellets. You'll see roach pellets, those little black spots. You'll see them. You'll see them, and you got to clean. You got to clean your area, all those things. So pests can cause sickness too. So symptoms of foodborne. So common symptoms that you're going to see from a foodborne illness. You're going to see diarrhea, vomiting, usually at the same time. It's pretty horrific. Fever, nausea, abdominal cramps, jaundice. Jaundice is the yellowing of the skin and eyes. They think they look like a little minion. Banana! They look like a minion. I love them. Onset times, it kind of will depend. Depends on the type of foodborne illness. Can range from 30 minutes to 6 weeks. So, you know what? I know that I've probably gotten foodborne illness before. Why? Because I've eaten something, and within the next hour, you know what? I've got diarrhea. Now, the thing that most people don't account for is that you can get it from 30 minutes to 6 weeks. So, you know what? You could eat something at a party a week ago, and you might be getting sick from it. So it just all depends. So that's why most people don't get the 6-week one unless it's something that is real hard. You're in the hospital. All right, these pathogens are highly infectious and can cause severe illnesses. So you have Salmonella typhi, you have Shigella, non-typhoidal Salmonella, Shiga toxins, which is your E. coli, and then hepatitis A or the norovirus. That is your big 6 pathogens, all right? So you got to know those. You got to know what they are, and you got to be able to identify them. And there's certain things you got to know about them. They are often found in very high numbers in an infected person's feces. So you'll find these in people's feces, their poop. Can be transferred to food easily. So again, you have the fecal oral, which is your, you know what, you didn't wash your hands and then you touch something and people eat it after you, and that's your fecal oral, how people get sick. And can make a person severely sick from small doses. So your big 6 is huge. Shared characteristics for your bacteria, they're found almost everywhere. Cannot be seen, smelled, or tasted. They grow rapidly, especially under certain conditions. You know what? With heat, it's going to grow rapidly. And if it's in, so your temperature danger zone is 41 degrees to 135, okay? So if I'm cooking something above 135 degrees, I'm good. If I'm cooling something down and I'm below 41 degrees, I'm good. It's that in between the 135 to 41. From 125 to 75 is where you have huge growth. And that's where usually it's you're cooling down, if you will, or you're heating up. If it just stays at that temperature, all of a sudden the bacteria just, it's like popcorn. It just rapidly grows, and that's how people get sick. So if I have something that it's just at a low temperature and it's just sitting out, the bacteria is going to get it, and it's going to get people sick. So that's why you want to get it. It's got to be out of that zone, okay? So it's 41 degrees to 135. So that's your temperature danger. That's like, woo, woo, woo. You got to be careful, okay? To prevent it, time temperature control. Again, you're keeping it lower than 41 degrees, so it's staying cold. What do our refrigerators stay at? They usually are at 40 degrees, 40 or lower, right? And then you're cooking things, you're always cooking above 135. Bacteria needs to grow, so you have fat time. So fat time, the F is your food, okay? So you got to have food for bacteria to grow. You're going to have the acidity. It needs to be more, not as acidic. You're going more towards neutral. Acid you're not going to have because it burns it, if you will. The acidity, it can't grow. Nothing can grow in acidity. But it's more has neutral to alkaline, it doesn't have that acidity, it's going to grow, okay? Temperature, I just talked about time temperature abuse, 135 to 40. So 135 to 41, okay? That is your time temperature. And then time, you're looking at so many hours. So if I'm lowering something, I told you yesterday, I talked about, not yesterday, 20 minutes ago, I talked about the lasagna that I heated up, right? And then I am lowering it and I let it cool down, and it cools down really slowly, and it stays at about 125 degrees for a little bit. Guess what? If I don't cook it tomorrow to that higher temperature to 165, it's not going to kill the bacteria. And let's say I just warm it up. You didn't kill the bacteria. So that's your time and your temperature. Oxygen, it's got to have oxygen in it, and then the moisture. Anything with moisture, that's great for the growth of bacteria, okay? Acidity, the pH of 7.5 to 4.6 is ideal for the growth, okay? Examples of food with the ideal pH: bread, raw chicken, cantaloupe. Think of cantaloupe, it sits out, right? Milk, cooked corn. Temperature, I talked about our temperature danger zone, 41 degrees to 135. So you're going to have that. The time, you got to watch how many hours it stays. Oxygen is bacteria needs oxygen to grow. All right. So if you, let's say I never knew this until years and years ago, The fryer, I always used to put, when I was done with the fryer, I always would put a sheet tray over the fryer to keep the oxygen out. And it was to help it not get bacteria, so. And then moisture, any kind of water you're going to have where you're going to see it grow, okay? Conditions you control, I can control time and temperature, and that's where it comes in for us. We're controlling that time and temperature. Spores, so bacteria can change into spores. Spores are often found in dirt. They say dirt don't hurt, right? No, it does. Think of anything like a potato. It grows in the ground, right? Can survive cooking temperatures. So spores can survive the cooking temperatures. That's why we got to wash that skin. We're washing the skin, right? We can change back to the form that grows. So your major foodborne bacteria, you have your Bacillus cereus, I can't say that, the Listeria, the Shiga toxin, which is your E. coli, which is from poop, the Campylobacter, the Listrodium, it's the Clostridium, sorry, non-fortial Salmonella, Salmonella typhi, the Shigella, the Staphylococcus, that's your staph, the Vibro, and so you have those. So controlling time and temperature can keep this bacteria from causing foodborne illness. So the Bacillus, the Listeria, the Shiga, the Campy, the Clostridium, and Botulum. The Clostridium botulinum is your botulism. So here you're going to have a bunch of slides. I would look at these. You want to see what your common links are, what your food. So if we're looking at the Bacillus cereus, that's the diarrhea illness. Commonly linked food is your cooked vegetables, your meat products, and your vegetable and your milk. Most common is your watery diarrhea and your no vomiting. So you want to look at these and see what they all are. What is it that causes it? What's your common linked foods? And what's your most common? And you're going to see most common symptoms: nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, those kind of things. Your Bacillus, your Bacillus cereus with the vomiting illness, that's going to be in your rice pudding. And again, how do you control it? Time, temperature abuse. Time and temperature. You got to keep it at cooler temperatures or heat it to the temperature it needs to, and it can't sit out for so long. So it's just holding it. The Listeria, that comes with your raw meat, okay? So think of your deli, your hot dogs, your soft cheeses. Here, common symptoms, it can miscarriage a pregnant woman, so you gotta be careful. Newborns. So any kind of deli meat, you gotta be wearing gloves. You gotta make sure that your cutting board is clean, sanitized, that you're not cross-contaminating, because that's the problem. Most people will get cross-contaminated. Then you have the Shiga toxin, that's your E. coli. That's from your ground beef or your contaminated produce. So you got to be careful with that. Diarrhea is your common symptoms, abdominal cramps, and your kidney failure. So those kind of things is what people are going to get sick. All right. And again, what prevents it? Time and temperature abuse. So it's why do you think you can't have a raw hamburger anymore? It used to be that when I was a kid, you could take hamburger meat raw and you could eat it. I would have friends who would eat it. They loved it. You can't do that anymore because, the bacteria. So very careful. You have the Campylobacter, that's with your poultry, water contaminated. So now you're going to get water. So let's say I have chickens that's sitting in that water people get sick from. Meat, stews, gravies. And again, looking at the common symptoms, the abdominal cramps, fever, and vomiting. All right, how do you prevent it? Time, temperature. Again, the Clostridium, here, your common meats, your common linked foods, meat, poultry, dishes made with meat, stews, gravies. Most common symptoms, diarrhea and severe pain, abdominal pain. So, again, how do you, it's time and temperature abuse. And it's the reheating. It's usually the reheating, because think of stews. We make a big pot of chili or beef stew, and we're going to reheat it. We don't reheat it to that temperature. It needs to be above 165 degrees in order for the bacteria to be killed. So it's just, having those. So your illness, botulism, okay? Incorrect canned food. So here you go, your canned food. You have your reduced oxygen packaged food. Temperature abuse vegetables such as baked potatoes. Here, so common symptoms for the botulism is nausea and vomiting, later weakness, double vision, and difficulty speaking and swallowing. You're going to want to know that one. Here, it's just cooling it, and it's cans. So any kind of botulism, if you have a can that is dented or that it's kind of swelling up, don't use it. Don't use it, because botulism is in there. Preventing cross-contamination keeps bacteria from causing foodborne illness. So that here you have your non-typhoidal salmonella or your salmonella typhi. Okay, that's your poultry, your eggs, your produce, tomatoes, cantaloupe, all of that. It can have the salmonella and diarrhea, abdominal cramps, vomiting, fever. So you got to prevent cross-contamination. You got to cook eggs to a minimum temperature, which is 140. You usually are cooking eggs to 140, 144. And you want to exclude food handlers who are vomiting or have diarrhea. If you're cooking eggs and you're cooking for people, you got to avoid that, so people can't be sick in the operation. The typhoid fever, that's your ready-to-eat foods and beverages. So now this is in your beverage. Common symptoms: high fever, weakness, abdominal pain, headaches, loss of appetite. And here it's, how to prevent it: cross-contamination, washing your hands, time, temperature, abuse. But it's prevent cross-contamination. Practicing good hygiene can keep these bacteria from causing the Shigella and the Staphylococcus. Here you got the salads. So here's your Shigella. That's your salads and contaminated water. So let's say the farm has a river or a well that the cows are, they're peeing or whatever by it or pooping in it, and then that water gets used to water the plants, and you get the plants home, and that produce, you don't wash it, and guess what? Now you got the Shigella, okay? Which will give you bloody diarrhea, abdominal pain and cramps, and fever. So you got to be careful with all those things. How do you not get it? Practice prevention, practice personal hygiene. Again, wash your hands. Control the flies inside and outside of the operation. Flies can contaminate, so you got to be careful with that. That's why you have, when you at the windows, at the doors, you always have the strong blowers that try and keep the bugs from flying in. The Staphylococcus, that is your food that requires handling during prepping. Your eggs, your tuna, your chicken, macaroni, deli meats, any of that, and your common symptoms: nausea, vomiting. And you can see a lot of the same symptoms, right? How do you not get it? Practice good hygiene. You got to cover wounds, hands. Anytime you cut yourself, you want to make sure you have a Band-Aid and put a glove on. All those things, reheating. The vibro, here, these bacteria, oysters. So vibro is from the oysters, so you got to know that's oysters. Guarantee it's going to be on the certification exam. Common symptoms: the diarrhea, the abdominal cramps, low-grade fever, chills. Purchase from an approved, reputable. Again, you're not going to get oysters or shrimp from someplace else. The other is when these come in, you're going to have a tag that's on the bag of these, and you're going to have to keep it for 90 days. You just put it in a drawer. In my storeroom, I always had a drawer that had all my tags, and I had to keep them at least for 90 days if somebody got sick, so that they could go and say, oh, all of a sudden from this one place where they all harvested all these oysters or mussels, whatever it is, they would harvest them in this one area. It's on that tag, and now it tells us that, you know what, if you got these mussels from here or oysters, guess what? It was in where it was harvested and people were sick. So you can be a part of that, so you'll know. General information about viruses. So here they're carried by human beings and animals. Requires a living host to grow. They do not grow in food, so it's going to grow on us or an animal. Can be transferred through food and remaining infectious in food. Sources: food, water, or any contaminated surface. Typically occur from fecal-oral routes. Okay, so that's your fecal-oral route. I've already been talking about that. Viruses can be transferred from person to person, people to food, or people to food contact surfaces. So let's say I sneeze and it hits the table surface, and then all of a sudden a salad gets done and it gets some of that, and now somebody just got contaminated and sick. People carry viruses in their feces. That's why you have your fecal-oral. Can transfer them to their hands after using the restroom. So you go to the bathroom, you wipe, it gets on your hands, you don't wash your hands, you go into the kitchen, and now you touch food, and that's your fecal-oral route. So it goes from your fecal, and it goes into somebody else's mouth. So, yeah, kind of gross, huh? Yeah, kills you. But people do. People don't wash their hands, and that's why it's important that you wash hands and you don't get people sick. Viruses cannot be destroyed by normal cooking temperatures. Preventative measures include food handlers who are vomiting or have diarrhea or jaundice from cooking. So anytime you see that, diarrhea, jaundice, vomiting, you don't want them cooking. You don't want them in your kitchen. You know, have I worked sick? Yes, I've worked sick many and many times. But did I have vomiting and diarrhea? No. No, if I have vomiting, I'm not in the kitchen at all. You just can't. Make sure that food handlers wash their hands regularly and correctly. Avoid bare hand contact, for ready-to-eat food. You gotta wear gloves. Gloves. I wear gloves all the time. It just makes me happy. Practicing good personal hygiene. Here you have your hepatitis A. Here that's with ready-to-eat foods and shellfish. Fever, nausea, abdominal pain, jaundice, you're going to see that. How to prevent it? Good personal hygiene. Other prevention measures, you have to exclude food handlers who have been diagnosed with hepatitis A from the operation. So if you have hepatitis A, you can't work in an operation. Exclude food handlers who have jaundice for 7 days. So if I have jaundice, if I'm a yellow minion and I'm jaundice, I'm yellow, guess what? I cannot be in the kitchen for 7 days. You need to know that. Wash hands, no bare hand contact, and purchase shellfish from approved reputable purveyor. So you're using the purveyors. The norovirus, here that's with shellfish also, okay? Ready to eat food. So everything that I just said, you got to keep people they got to wash their hands. So parasite, characteristics of parasite require a host to live and reproduce. Seafood, wild game, food processed with contaminated water such as produce. So, I talked about the, animals pee or poop in the water, and then they use that water to spray the produce. Preventing is purchasing from approved reputable suppliers. I told you, approved reputable suppliers. It becomes a tongue teaser. Cook food to required minimum internal temperatures, and fish will be served raw or undercooked, must be frozen correctly by the manufacturer. So usually you're going to see, let's say you've had tuna at a Japanese restaurant, you have the sashimi. Usually this is a high grade, and literally it comes off the boat, it's cut, and it goes right into a freezer. It's that instant freeze, so nothing has gotten on it, and parasites can't get on it, so it doesn't harm you when you eat it raw. Purchasing from approved reputable suppliers, I talked about that, and it's just looking at, so now you're looking at different, you have the anisakis, which is your herring, your cod, your halibut, your mackerel, and your Pacific salmon. Tingling in the throat. You're going to see the toxins with the parasites. You're going to see that tingling in your throat. Coughing up the worms. Yeah, I know. That's why you don't want to cook fish to a certain temperature. You got to cook it to the temperature that needs to be cooked. Serving raw or undercooked, you got to make sure you're getting the sashimi grade. Contaminated water, you have your cryptosporidium, that is your contaminated water and produce. You have your Giardia, which here is your intestinals, correctly treated water and produce. So again, you're making sure that you're using correctly treated water. The cycloporiasis, that's with your berries, produce such as berries, lettuce, or basil. It's not treated. It's incorrectly treated. You have your nausea, your vomiting, your diarrhea, all those good things. How do you prevent it? Purchase from approved, reputable sources, and food handlers, washing hands, gloves. Fungi, here we go, sometimes makes people sick, commonly spoil food. Examples, mold and yeast, okay? So any kind of spoiled food, it will cause toxins. If it will grow well in almost any condition, especially in the acidic food with low water activity. You got to be careful. Have you ever seen cheese that has mold on it? You got to cut it off. Usually they say throw it away. Throw out all moldy food unless the mold is a part of that food. Like you have mold in your blue cheese. It's injected with the mold. It's injected with penicillin and it makes a mold. Basic characteristics of yeast: can spoil food quickly, may produce a smell or a taste of alcohol. It reminds me, I just started doing a sourdough bread starter, and I can smell that acidity, that sour, that yeasty, and I'm doing a natural one, so that always makes me think of that. May look a white or pink discoloration or slimy, bubbly. Anything that if you open up something and it's bubbly, throw it away. Or it has some sort of discoloration on it that shouldn't be there, throw it away. My motto is, when in doubt, don't. So if you think that by any chance, throw it away. I can't tell you how many times I've thrown stuff away, and I'm glad that I did, so that I don't have to worry, did I get somebody sick or not? When in doubt, throw it away. And always ask somebody else. You know, I can't tell you how many cooks, they come to me and they're like, chef, smell this, and I smell, I'm like, oh, throw it away. You know, so always throw away. Sources of biological toxins: seafood, plants, and mushrooms. Okay, so you got to make sure that the seafood toxin cannot be smelt or tasted, and that's the problem. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, you know, you can't see it. Sources in fish naturally occur: pathogens, fish that have been eaten, smaller fish, you know, they might have had a toxin. Sources in shellfish that have been eaten algae are with the toxin. So here you're looking at your histamine, your I want to say the Shiga toxin, the saxitoxin, the brevetoxin, and the Dominic. So the histamine, that's with your tuna and your bonito, your mackerel and mahi. And these special ones that you see, like this one with the tuna and the bonito, you need to know these. Because it will be on your certification. Purchase from a reputable and time temperature abuse. The shigu, that's your barracuda and your grouper, your jack and your snapper. Those fish you're going to see. Here, the predatory tropical reef. Okay, so you need to know that one. Most important. And then you have the saxitoxin, which is your clams, mussels, scallops, oysters. Okay, so look at those. The brevetoxin, that's your clams and your mussels. Here, that's from your warm waters of the west coast of Florida, Gulf of Mexico, and Caribbean Sea. So you got to look at those. And then you have the domic, which is your amnesic. So here they get the disoriented, the confusion. The clams, mussels, oysters. So look at those so that you'll be ready for that. Your mushroom toxins, okay, are caused by eating toxic wild mushrooms. So that's why you don't just go out and just pick a bunch of mushrooms. Can be prevented. okay? Foodborne illness linked, you got to be careful, undercooked kidney beans, all of that. So this chapter, you can see it was a longer chapter, but you got to know the big six. I got a forum for us for the big six. Your last name will be whichever one I have on there. So you're going to have to sign in and talk about that. Okay? If you have any questions, let me know, but that's chapter 2. We'll take a break, and then I'll be back to do chapter 3. Thanks.